The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right. We'll call the January 7th, 2025 Local Government Commission meeting to order. I'll ask Cindy to call the roll.
Thank you. Hello, Happy New Year. This is Cindy Aiken, Assistant General Counsel. And we will start today. Secretary Marshall is here in person. And Senator Bullock
Here.
is here in person. Secretary Wootler.
Here.
Thank you. In person. Mr. Burns.
Here.
In the room. And Mr. Butler.
Here.
Also in the room. Councilwoman Hoffman.
Here.
Thank you. She's participating virtually. Ms. Harvey.
Here.
Thank you. Also virtual. And Mr. Philbeck.
Here.
And Treasurer Briner
Here.
is here in person. Full house. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our new members. Roll call quickly of our staff. Present today, Secretary of LGC Debbie Tomasco, Director of Debt Management Jennifer Wimmer, Director of Fiscal Management Kendra Boyle. We have just the same old routine housekeeping announcements. Our meeting proceedings are being recorded and will be made available to the public pursuant to our department's recording of public meetings policy. Everyone, please remember to identify yourself when speaking for the benefit of those listening, especially. If you are participating virtually, please mute yourself when you are not speaking. If we were to lose power or AV in the room, it is possible that there will still be recording going on, which would be broadcast to the outside world. So we ask you to keep that in mind with your conversations. As a reminder, the meeting agenda is posted on our website, www.nctreasure.com, at the LGC page. If we have any changes, that will be announced during the meeting. We will take all votes by roll call, and unless there's an objection from the chair or anyone else, we may continue taking your motion and second as a yes vote unless you want to indicate otherwise. Please remember that the microphones in the ceiling in this room are very sensitive, and try to limit rustling, noise, and conversations are welcome to be had out in the lobby. That concludes the announcements.
Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. And a salute to the North Carolina flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I salute the flag of North Carolina and pledge to the old North State love, loyalty, and faith.
Thank you. So on conflicts of interest, please take a moment to review the agenda. Commission members are reminded of your duty to avoid conflicts of interest. Does any member have an actual or potential conflict of interest with respect to any matter on the agenda?
The Treasurer, it's Nancy Hoffman. I need to be recused from the Greensboro GEO refunding item on the consent agenda and the Piedmont Water Authority, please.
And so we'll vote on those separately.
Mr. Chairman, I need to be recused from the Durham GEO bond referendum. I'm a taxpayer in the county of Durham.
Yeah.
And Mr. Treasurer, this is Ms. Harvey. I need to recuse myself from the Piedmont Triad Regional Water Authority matter.
So we'll vote on all of those separately.
Do you think I need to do that?
No, sir. If you are just a member of the general class.
It's not a commercial property. I think I'll talk to them about maybe if it was commercial property, it might be something different, but it is just residential.
Okay, it's also helpful for.
Okay, thanks. So I won't recuse myself.
Okay, so scratch that. Thank you, sir.
So procedural matters having completed, I want to take a minute just to give a couple thoughts before we launch into the agenda. It's obviously my first meeting, fresh set of eyes on things. I will continue to learn things and we'll all continue to evolve together. There were three items, though, that came up as Deb and I have been talking, and I've been learning about what the commission does and been observing over the last 6 or 8 months here. two of which are items for further study that I'd ask for all of your input on and we'll think about over time that are more customs for the Local Government Commission historically than anything. The first is how we maintain our issuance calendar. Historically, we have only authorized one issuer per day just to make sure that we weren't impacting the markets disproportionately. That is a custom whose time may have passed. And so we want to think about how we can be more user-friendly for our issuers, particularly if it's not actually going to impact the bond market. And so that's one item that we'll discuss in coming meetings, and we'll think about how we approach as the LGC. The second is we've had more of a custom than anything around amortization schedules, limiting them to 20 years. Over time, that is not where the market is, and we want to evaluate that. We have no desire to be more aggressive. We simply want to match finance assets with their debt. And so over time, we'll consider changing the 20-year amortization schedule. So those are two items for further study, and we'd love your thoughts on as we do so. The third piece is a procedural issue, and I think we're going to try this for the February meeting, see how it works, and we'd love your thoughts on how it works and whether it's appropriate. Historically, we have sent out meeting materials a week in advance and waited until the meeting to decide what should come off and on the consent agenda. There has been a little controversy around that, I know, historically. And so in an effort to shine more light on what is on and what is off the consent agenda in advance of the meeting, what we're going to ask is that after you receive the meeting materials a week in advance, by a day and a half or so, we'll nail this down exactly, and we'll email you, maybe Monday at noon in advance of the Tuesday meeting. We would ask that if there's any item you want removed from the consent agenda, that you notify us what that item is and why you think it needs to be removed. And we will happily take it off. So that is your right as a commission member to pull it off the consent agenda. There are items that will never be on the consent agenda. Those are items that are on the unit assistance list and entities that have a financial performance indicator concern. And then to the extent there are ever entities where staff does not recommend that we proceed. So those will always be on the agenda for us to discuss. But for things that fall outside those three categories, we will presume that they will remain on the consent agenda unless one commission member notifies us that they want them pulled off and the reason why. This will also allow us to notify the issuer that they have been pulled off the consent agenda in advance to make sure that they can show up in person with all of their advisors as necessary to allow them the courtesy to not waste a trip here if they're coming from out of the Triangle region and be prepared for what might be a robust discussion. So we'll change that process for the February meeting. I hope it will allow us to have a little bit clearer rationale as to what is being discussed and what is not being discussed and why, which will, I think, provide transparency to everybody. So we'll try it out in February. I'm sure there will be some kinks we don't anticipate on the deadline. We'll put this all in an email to you all, but we think that it ought to lead this commission to function even better than it already does. So with that, I thank you all for indulging me. I will tell you, and you'll figure this out very quickly, I am no expert in Robert's Rules of Order. I didn't say it right. And so bear with me as I figure all that out over time, and I'll look for robust discussion on all of these things. So with that, we're going to move to the approval of minutes. There is one small correction that Debbie would like to make before we move to approve those minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Just a small correction, nothing material, on the date of the approval, actually, ironically enough, of the prior month's minutes. There was on page 1, Auditor Holmes made a motion to approve the minutes of the October 1st, 2024 meeting. That should actually be November 12th, 2024 meeting. Again, minor change, but we'll correct that in the minutes and the votes will reflect the correction there.
So do I hear a motion to approve the minutes from the December 3rd meeting?
I have a question, please.
Sure.
But if you want to get a motion on the table first, just go ahead. I wasn't here. I was in Washington, and I regretted I wasn't here because of the nature of concluding people's time on this council. And I know that there was discussion about that, and yet I looked to see about it in the minutes, and there was nothing there at all. And I know we don't put all kinds of dialogue in there, but I thought it's almost, I don't know, I don't want to say disrespectful, but it almost doesn't fully reflect the minutes that it was the last time that 3 members would be on, and they were thanked for their service. And I thought that ought to be in the minutes.
Because we can update that if the commission.
I agree. Let's make that adjustment. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes subject to that adjustment?
So moved.
Take a second.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Those moved.
Moved by Byrne, seconded by Otter Bullock. So, Cindy, would please call the roll.
All right. And on those minutes with the correction on the previous months, adding language to reflect the departure comments. And so we'll get that out to everyone. Secretary Marshall.
Aye.
And the vote seconded. Secretary Wooten.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Barnes made the motion. Mr. Butler.
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Harvey.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hoffman.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck.
Aye.
Treasurer Bryant.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. So with that, let's move to attachment A. This is the pension OPEB liability report for on the agenda. You'll see in the last page various OPEB liabilities and some net positions against. I would highlight Mecklenburg County, particularly Cornelius and Greensboro, as having made material progress, as well as the Western Piedmont Council of Governments against their OPEB liability. That's something that we are seeking to do a better job of at the state level as well. As Treasurer Falwell, I think, said, 96 consecutive LGC meetings. So we'll make it 97, and I suspect we'll be at 98 next month as well. But these liabilities are material for our state, material for our local entities, and we want to make sure we highlight them every time we get together, as they're important ways to manage the fiscal situation for all of these entities. So with that, let's move to attachment B and the UAL entities.
For our new members' benefit and just for a refresher for our returning members, I wanted to first provide a little bit of background on the 2 separate attachments that you'll sometimes have in your meeting materials, and you actually have both in your meeting materials this month. And it also addresses what Treasurer Briner has talked about with regards to which units will be presented separately. So just as background, there's 1,100 units of local government and public authority under the oversight of the Local Government Commission. Good number of those are just our counties and municipalities, 100 counties, 551 municipalities. Those units submit their annual audit reports to us, required under law. And with those audits, they also provide us with some financial data from those audit reports. We have developed what we call financial performance indicators that allow us to assess the financial health and the fiscal management practices of these local governments that provide this information to us. When a local government submits data that basically doesn't meet or exceed certain thresholds that we set for those financial performance indicators, that's when we call them financial performance indicators of concern. We have to set a number somewhere for those thresholds. So just because a unit might have a financial performance indicator of concern, that's not necessarily a huge concern for us. For example, with fund balance available, that's one of our financial performance indicators of concern. And one of the thresholds is 25%. If there were a town, a city that was a historically well-run city, they have an adopted fund balance policy, they have a good trend of use of fund balance, and they come in at 23%, not 25%, we're not going to bring that to you. That's not a concern of staff's. What we're going to bring you is FPICs that we deem to be material, information that we believe you need to have as members in order to make a well-informed decision on the debt applications that you have before you. So one of those groupings that you'll see is those units with material financial performance indicators of concern. Those units, for those units, you'll receive a summary of their financial performance indicators of concern and the unit's response. Under North Carolina Administrative Code, if there are financial performance indicators of concern, the unit must provide a response to the LGC signed by a majority of their governing board. So we're looking from them for a response to those indicators and what their plan is to remedy those issues. So that's one group that you'll see is those what we call FPIC units, those ones with material financial performance indicators. The next group is the UAL units, and I think we need to sort of rename this attachment. What it really is the units that are on the unit assistance list that are coming for contract approvals under General Statute 159, 148, and the lower thresholds established recently in legislation. That's an awful lot to put on a cover page, though. Essentially, if you think of all units as sort of an upside down, if you think of an upside down triangle, we start with all units under LGC control. Then they might have financial performance indicators. That's a little more narrow group. Then the financial performance indicators that we deem material for coming before you is an even smaller group. And at the very bottom is those units on the unit assistance list. If a unit is on the unit assistance list, it really probably should and already has financial performance indicators of concern that are material. Nobody should be surprised that they're on the UAL, essentially. They should know that through those FPICs. So the units on the UAL, if they were coming before the commission for a $5 million building, for a $5 million contract, you'll see those as units with material FPICs because they have those FPICs. The UAL units are really the UAL units coming before you purely because of lowered thresholds for LGC approval. Under legislation about 2 years ago, it changed when UAL units have to come for the LGC for approval. Under existing law, if a unit were to enter into a contract for more than 5 years or $500,000, let me reverse that. If a unit were to enter into a contract for less than 5 years or $500,000, they didn't need LGC approval. And if they were if they were going to purchase vehicles, they didn't need to come for approval. The legislation that was enacted a few years ago required that UAL units come before the LGC for 3 years and $50,000 contracts, or if they're buying vehicles. This was an important change, I think, because it gives our staff more oversight into some of these smaller local governments that might be facing some challenges, making sure that they're not getting into situations that they either can't manage, can't repay because of what's perceived as sort of smaller dollar amounts. But again, Jennifer, a fire truck might be $2 million or so. So for a small local government to have that vehicle exception, that was a pretty big exception. So we're bringing these to you separately because they're fitting in this specific bucket of both being on the UAL and being subject to these lower thresholds for LGC approval. I know that's a lot of information and a lot of background, but there is I've developed a summary for those attachments that we'll include in every month's packet that again sort of reviews why these units are being pulled separately and discussed separately. And really what it comes down to is ensuring that members have all the information we think they need to make an informed decision on the applications before them. So thank you for allowing me that time to provide that background, and Jennifer will move those items, Treasurer, if that's
great. Thank you.
Good afternoon. The first item on this part of the agenda is for Edgecombe County. You will notice that they follow in the next attachment, but as Debbie mentioned, this is specifically for a lease that is under $500,000. So it's $185,000, and they're extending their copy lease for 48 outdated machines. And they have a not to exceed interest rate 5%, and the terms is 5 years. And I will turn it over to Kendra to go over their FPICs.
So the FPICs for Edgecombe County, you'll see there are two for fiscal year 2024. First one is related to complying with their adopted budget. And in the case of Edgecombe County, The issue that they had in fiscal year 2024 was they exceeded their budget for debt service by $226,000. Now, this occurred due to the implementation of a new accounting standard where it was not taken into account when they did their budget that this new accounting standard could affect their actual expenditures compared to the budget. So this is a violation that occurred. We saw it happening in multiple units. And for these first couple of years of implementation, we have expected to see that. If it continues, that would become something of a higher concern if that continues, because these new accounting standards have been in place for a while, and we would expect them to accommodate that. In the FPIC response from Edgecombe County, they acknowledged why this over expenditure happened and outlined a plan of action for fixing it so that it does not occur in the future. And that plan included, their additional review procedures to monitor their budget so to make sure that they make the amendments necessary if they do not include them when they adopt their budget originally. So that response was deemed to be acceptable by our staff. The other issue that they had was that they had non-compliance with bond covenants. Now, each issuance of a bond usually comes with some type of covenant related to debt service ratio, and it's set at a certain percentage. And depending on the bond, depending on the unit, what those percentages are could change. In the case of Edgecombe County, for their water district number 4, their debt service coverage ratio was set at 110%. When the audit was conducted, it's disclosed in the notes that they were sitting at 61%. So they were well below their debt service coverage ratio that was required in the covenants. And we deemed this to be an internal control issue as well as something that affects the finances. In response to this, the county is in the process of doing a rate study in which they will do the calculations to find out what rate needs to be in place to cover their debt service, the covenants, as well as any type of issuance of debt that they may have. So we deemed that their plan of action to be acceptable, and those were the facts that we wanted you all to know before you make a decision on the approval of this debt.
If I may, Treasurer, one point of clarification is that those debt service covenants were related to debt out of their water sewer fund, right. And this debt is general fund debt. Yes. So although there are concerns that we have from a fiscal management perspective, it's not related to the source of repayment for this particular debt.
So the first one had to do with the accounting standards changing. So, as I assume accounting standards will change periodically over time. So does staff use kind of a formula of some kind? How do you decide when a time tolls, when there's been enough time to adhere to the standard? Or are there some factors that are included in that? Size of the municipality? So how do you all decide, enough time, you've had enough time to meet the standard?
Right. In the case of these accounting standards that caused the violation, it was GASB 87 related to leases that was implemented 2 years ago. And then there was right on top of that was another one about that was very similar for subscription-based information technology arrangements. So that's 2 years that had some pretty substantive standards. So if they still have this issue next year, that's very concerning to us. Gotcha. But they had one right after the other. Okay. So that's how we make that determination.
Thank you.
Okay. I should recognize that the team from Edgecombe County is in attendance virtually. The county manager, Eric Evans, the CFO, Linda Barfield, and the financial reporting administrator, Joseph Magana. If we have any questions for them. Secretary Marshall.
Yeah, I want to unburden my soul since the beginning of the year about something that's bothered me for a long time. And I'm not just picking on Edgecombe County, but that's the issue that's in front of us. On this second one, frequently when we find one of these FPICs, they come back and tell you what the remedy is. You know, they don't tell you how they got there and what they're going to do to prevent it from happening again. And here you have from 110 down to almost half of that in coverage. That didn't happen in 1 week, 1 month. And you mentioned in your report internal controls. What have they done to systematize the control to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Having a rate study doesn't solve the business problem of the city.
Right, I think that's a great question to
Or the
address
county,
to
in this case.
the county.
Are they, MJ, they're unmuted? Eric Evans is on. He was self-muted.
Yeah, can you hear us? This is Eric Evans.
We can hear you now.
Okay, good. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to that question. And certainly that is a very reasonable question. Just to, I guess, give some context, our countywide water system is broken up into 6 districts. Those districts are to financially cover themselves, though we operate it as one countywide system. So we have one single rate for the entire county. As you would imagine, each of our districts vary in population density. And so therefore, some of our districts are a little more challenging to meet a debt covenant such as that than others. Another challenge we try to balance is we strategically raise our rates to try to cover our expenses. Overall, our system is solvent. We just happen to, in this particular district, not have yet reached to satisfy that bond covenant. So when we raise our rates, we try to do that incrementally so as to not to drop undue burden on our citizens, our customers. So, but as was mentioned, we are having a rate study done. Once we get that back, and we should get that back soon, we will decide on how much we need to cover or increase our rates to cover that bond covenant.
Mr. Evans, this is Treasurer Brunner. What are the financial implications of missing the covenant? Do you have a penalty interest rate you pay, or are there other ramifications for the county for missing that covenant?
No, there's no penalty for it, and the source of the funds, which is USDA Rural Development, is very much aware of it. They're aware of. They know that it's a bond covenant we're supposed to meet, but they also recognize that we're meeting our debt service on that, and overall our system is solvent.
And maybe piggybacking on Secretary Marshall's question, what was the coverage ratio for this district last year?
I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me, but I certainly can find that out and follow up with staff.
Thank you. Any other questions?
See, observation seems to me an odd system with independent districts that vary, and you have one rate for everybody in the county. How does a district make up if everybody else helps make it up, but the districts sort of stand alone in the covenants? Kind of oddball to me. I'm having a hard time getting my mind around it.
I don't know. Are there other counties that do it this way?
I have no idea.
Yes, there are other counties that have separate entities, and the reporting structure and the financial structure can differ in how they're managed even. So,
Yeah, that's a county management decision, how they structure that.
Any other questions? Hearing none, do I hear a motion? Sorry. We'll do Roxborough. Yeah, so we'll do those separately. Do I hear a motion on the installment purchase for Edgecombe County? I'll move approval. Do I hear a second?
Second, Nancy House.
Cindy, will you call the roll?
For Edgecombe County on attachment B, we have Burns Hoffman, Secretary Marshall.
Aye.
Auditor Bullock.
Aye.
Secretary Wooten.
Aye.
Mr. Butler.
Aye.
Ms. Harvey.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck.
Aye.
Thank you. And Treasurer Briner.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Moving over to the city of Roxborough.
The city of Roxborough is the second unit coming under these parameters. These are a group of vehicles. The dollar amount actually is $1.9 million, and it consists of a garbage truck, some police vehicles, a snow truck, which is actually a modified dump truck so they can use it year-round, and some police vehicles and a carrier mount for some the truck that's already existing. The information is actually on the fire truck. The fire truck will not be financed completely with the loan from Truist. An additional $500,000 that's called Red Leg, which is Rural Development Loan and Grant Program through Piedmont Electrical Membership Corporation is the entity that is loaning them that money. That comes with a 0% 10-year term and annual payments. The balance of that fire truck would then be financed with the Truist loan, which all the other vehicles are being financed with a not-to-exceed rate of 4.72% and a term of 5 years. The breakdown of the bank loan, the federal rural development loan, and the cash that the city is providing is indicated with the sources and the breakdown on the uses part of the agenda item. And I will turn it over to Kendra to discuss their financial performance indicators.
So Roxborough, the majority of their financial performance indicators are concerned, and the reason that they are on the unit assistance list has to do with the water and sewer fund. This debt request that they are bringing to you all today will be serviced out of the general fund. But for the general fund, one of their items of concern was their fund balance available as a percentage of their expenditures. And for the units with the expenditure level of Roxborough, we put the threshold at about 25%. They're coming in this latest fiscal year at 16.25%. Now, this is an improvement over the prior year, but they've kind of done this where they were up at 28%, dipped down to 12, now they're going back up. So they're on the upswing, but their response to being under that 25% is to point out that in this current fiscal year, they are anticipating having more revenue than what they have budgeted. So budgets requires that their revenue has to equal their expenditure. So it will bring in, they anticipate an extra $858,000 to this fiscal year. That will fall to fund balance. So that will contribute to increasing their fund balance, as well as in the next fiscal year, they will be experiencing revaluation. What we have seen in units that have, in the last couple of years, had these property revaluations, they are increasing from 30% up to some units have increased 70% in their property revaluations. So the unit is also anticipating that maintaining the same property tax rate, that they will be increasing their revenue in the next fiscal year. They plan to be budgeting that way, and therefore they feel that by 2026, they will have been able to increase their fund balance available percentage above the 25%. So that was how their plan of action to address this fund balance available percentage. And their water and sewer fund, they have had an issue with their quick ratio, which is current assets over current liabilities, their ability to cover those that cover those liabilities with their assets. We like to see one, they're at 0.75. The one that is, the next two that are most concerning to us are their operating loss in their water and sewer fund. They, in the last fiscal year, they lost $750,000 in their water and sewer fund. And when we looked at their unrestricted cash adequacy, all the cash that they have in that water and sewer fund is restricted. So those were items that we had great concern over, and they have provided us with a response related to increasing rates, and they have been doing so gradually, as the last unit talked about, that they want to do that gradually to increase and recognize that they need to improve the financial health of their unit. And so they believe that doing that work, that they have the increasing of rates, the commitment to maintaining expenditures at the current level will address these items of concern. But again, this issuance that they're coming to you for today is related to the general fund.
Where is the Roxborough give and take in response? Because I don't see it in the copy attachment.
It was not included. That was our oversight.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was, because it was a UAL unit and we're trying to restructure the kind of information we provide, it was not included this time. But we can provide the response if you'd like it. And Kendra has pretty much verbally covered all the information we have. We can provide that. So we'll make sure that's right next month.
Their response was deemed sufficient by staff?
Yes, it was.
Thank you.
Recognize that the team from the city of Roxborough is also virtually in attendance. City Manager Brooks Lockhart, Finance Director Janelle Moore, and consultant Dan Craig as well, should anyone have questions for them. Any other questions? With that, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the city of Roxborough.
So moved. Second.
Call the roll, please.
That was the second. Yeah, Cindy.
Rogers, motion, and we move in a second. The city of Roxborough for their assorted vehicles, two financings, one with Truist Bank and the other through the electric membership, the Red Road loan. And that's Bullock and Lucy. Secretary Marshall. Thank you. Mr. Burns.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Butler.
Aye.
Ms. Harvey. Aye. Thank you. Councilwoman Hoffman.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck. And Treasurer Briner.
Aye.
Thank you, Briner. Okay.
Great. So we'll move on to the Epic Units Attachment C.
And I'll turn this over to Jennifer again. You've heard these are both from Edgecombe County again. Kendra's already addressed all the concerns from our fiscal management team, and Jennifer will just present the specific items they're requesting approval.
Sure. As Debbie mentioned, these don't fall under the category because of the dollar amount and the time frame that's indicated. So the first lease is for body cameras and in-car cameras for the sheriff's department for $891,000, and it's a 5-year loan. And the second is cardiac monitors for the Emergency Medical Services Department, $730,000, and 6 years is the term of that. As indicated, these two installments are paid out of the general fund, and Kendra had already covered the performance indicators and their responses. So if there are any further questions about these, I would be happy to take them, or the county could.
I'm sorry. This is Cindy. I didn't notice before. So these are both leases. Do we have the name of the company that's, we can check that. I think I have to prepare the minutes. Well, if the managers.
I follow.
If they're still on the phone.
If they're still on the phone, they can answer it most of the time. These types of leases are done not with a financial institution, but the provider themselves, but they can verify that.
That's correct. With the provider themselves, the body cameras is Axon, and for the cardiac monitors, a company called Stryker.
Okay.
Any other questions on the 2 leases for Edgecombe County?
I have a question on the documents in the package. It looks like the debt ratio, the debt per capita as listed for Edgecombe County is the same. Is that reflective of all of the debt that's being assessed here? Okay.
If I may answer that, we are working to clarify how we present that information, Ms. Harvey. That's a really, thank you for that observation. If 3 items, as in the example this month, are coming before you for Edgecombe County, what we had been doing was adding to the debt ratio for each item, but then we would have to know which order they were presented and make sure they were voted that order. So what we've pivoted to in a first step in an improvement is assuming that these will all pass. So if 3 applications are before you, or 2, more than 1, as in this case, we will present that increase in the debt ratio and the outstanding debt to you as the same number across all 3. What we haven't done yet, though, and what we plan to do for next month is figure out where on these sheets we are going to make that clear. Because the concern that I have, as well as if somebody picks up one of these sheets individually, that combined debt that we're adding to their debt ratios isn't necessarily the amount in that single item. So we're going to work to figure out how to disclose on these that the amounts being shown in those debt and debt ratio section reflects all of the applications being presented to the commission at that meeting, so that we're a little more clear on that. So again, we're always striving to make some improvements. I think that was a half step forward worth getting them all consistent, but it doesn't necessarily reflect, to your point, Ms. Harvey, that each of them individually add their own component amount to those ratios. So we're still working. But yes, if you look at the amount that they're increasing by, that reflects all 3 of Edgecombe County's requests today.
All right. Thank you for that clarification.
With that, it sounded like we were about to get a motion for both issuances.
Yep. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We'll call the roll.
This is for the 2 remaining Edgecombe County matters, or their hearing consistent. Marshall and Wooten. That would be Oliver Bullitt.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Burns?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Butler?
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Harvey?
Aye.
Councilwoman Hoffman?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck?
Aye.
Mr. O'Brien?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving over to the consent agenda. I think I heard, just to double check, that we're pulling the city of Greensboro, the Piedmont Tribe Regional Water Authority, and the Western Piedmont Council of Government off the consent agenda per requests from committee members. Is that correct?
I'd like to just ask a question or 2 about Ashe County.
Sure, absolutely do that.
Sorry, I missed Western Piedmont. Was that
I
just
thought
a
someone
request?
mentioned it. Yes. So we'll pull all 4 off and vote on the rest of the consent agenda separately. So I'll need advice on which order we're going to do those.
We can do consent first and then each of them. And we do have, Mr. Treasurer, some corrections and updates to the consent agenda. Do you have those?
Just to note, the Ashe County agenda item, I wanted to update the ratings, they have come in at AA3 for Moody's. They are not using S&P. So they're just using the Moody's rating. And then I just wanted to point out about the GeoBond referendums.
So Jennifer, one more correction. Piedmont Triad Regional Water Authority, that final maturity should be 2032 instead of December of 2032 instead of April 1st of 2027. So final maturity on Piedmont Triad Regional Water Authority should be December 2032, not April 1st, 2027. I think those are the only technical updates and corrections.
And did we pull the Western Piedmont Council of Government?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Conflict matter. So we'll pull those 4 off, which leaves us with, just to recap, the city of Burlington, the town of Cornelius, the town of Dunn, city of Durham, Mecklenburg County times 3, city of Thomasville as our consent agenda. Western Piedmont.
Ms. Harvey, did you recuse from Piedmont Triad or Western Piedmont?
Piedmont Triad.
Okay, so we can leave Western Piedmont on? I may have missed it. Then we will leave Western Piedmont on as well on the consent agenda. So Ashe County, Greensboro, and Piedmont Triad are coming off. So I'll entertain a motion for the modified consent agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
So moved, Nancy Hoffman.
I'll take you as a second if that's okay, Ms. Hoffman.
That's fine.
Thank you.
I have a question since the Western Piedmont is in here. I've been here a long time and just don't remember very many of these regional things coming in and what have you. What standard, we talk about how they manage their money. Is this exactly the same standards that the local governments are held to? I mean, not really held at all.
You talking about the COG?
Yes. The
Yeah, I
regional,
am
yeah.
too.
Please.
Cindy, again, if you're asking about the findings, it's not the same. So we've referenced, thank you for bringing that up, just to mention 159-153. That is the statute in our chapter that covers other financing arrangements. But in the case of a COG, they have a specific statutes in 160A in their article, and it says if they want to borrow money and put up their real estate as security, they will be approved by the LGC under, it specifically says 159-153. So those findings are way less than the other units, and that doesn't mean that they shouldn't manage their money well, but it's kind of built in a different way. It's mounting folders right up front. So the findings for COG in this situation are that the amount of indebtedness is not excessive for the purpose contemplated, that the COG has demonstrated financial responsibility and capability to fulfill its obligation. And 3, this is kind of irrelevant. The proposed manner and date of the financing transaction will not have an adverse effect upon anybody else's schedule. They're not selling bonds, they're taking out a loan. So that's pretty simplified, but they do have to demonstrate to our analysts the financial capability. And just as a side note, for the benefit of our new members, the LGC is never responsible to opine or approve the, quote, legality of the underlying transaction. That's the job of the attorneys of the individual units. And I had a question about the authority of the COG. It's kind of fuzzy. There's the statute and then there's their charter, and they may or may not need to have specific authority from each of the member governments. We asked their attorney for an opinion, and the COG's attorney has given the opinion that they have met all required
Didn't answer your question, did they?
It says they have all the legal authority to enter into this, and they probably.
And they've pledged property for this.
That is collateral. Yeah, but that's their lender's problem too, whether or not they have legal authority to do it. So, thanks for bringing that up. So this is very rare. Yeah, we don't see the Council of Government unit too often. But they had a very it's almost like the Centennial Authority that had a very specific statute directing what the findings are to be.
Well, I have another question. Go ahead, Joe. No. Did I read in here they're going to use the tourism tax to pay for this? Is that right? The occupancy tax.
That's may I ask a question? That's the tax that funds their operations, right? So they're just taking the money they normally get and they're assigning a portion of it to pay back this debt. Is that how it works? So, okay. So the Triangle J gets the same occupancy tax from its member counties, and they run their that's the one I'm familiar with. So they run their operations off that income.
Yes.
And so they're just these guys are just saying we're going to use a portion of that and pay back this debt with that money. Okay, that makes sense to me. Does that make sense to you, Mr. Bowen?
I'm struggling with it. What does the Secretary of State think about it? Elaine, you and I've been around longer than anybody else. I've never seen this before.
You know, sometimes wisdom comes with age, but sometimes age just comes right by itself. I'm avoiding your question. Well, and you know, this one is a building and the other one is a water system, right?
Well, the other one is the water system's got revenue, it comes off the sale of water.
Yeah, right.
They just like selling water to Smithfield from the regional authority.
Yes, Stephanie, are there any questions the analyst needs to answer, or
I have one question, real quick. You said the attorney for the COG gave you an opinion. Did he also let you know that all the member counties were in favor, or did he give you any additional illustration on whether these other counties, there were some counties that sort of opposed this, or?
I did not see it, I did not see anything in the file other than the opinion, unless the analyst on staff has any different answer. We just gave a blanket opinion that the COG has all requisite legal authority to enter into this transaction. Hang on a second. Let me look at their resolution real quick and see if I saw the attendance of their meeting. I might be wrong. That's the one thing I didn't. Of course, they made all the findings like you would as if you were a unit of government, but. Let's get the dashboard pulled up.
While we do that, are there other questions that we can pose or
Well,
answer?
You know, COG members change all the time. All the time. And if all the COG directors were standing here in front of me, I'd say the same thing. They haven't been able to put together these regional water groups that we've been needing, that we've been dumping all this money into, to do these regional water studies. And many of y'all have heard me say the same thing. We come out with all these regional water centers, studies that say, and we'll form a regional water authority that'll implement it. You know, and I've always been, let's form the authority first. See if you can get an authority where they'll work together before we dump all this money to do all these studies. And I will not be voting for this.
Okay, clarification, is that not voting on Piedmont Triad or voting on?
I'm not voting on the Western Piedmont Council of Governments money to build a building. No, the water system, I understand that perfectly. That's just a regional water system where you jack the rates up to service the revenue. As I said, I chaired the one for southeastern North Carolina for years. So that's a no-brainer. But this other one, I will not vote for it.
Okay. Go ahead, tell, yeah, those, MJ. MJ said, we may have some, the COG representative. Mr. Pugh.
We do have,
Right, he is, he's self-muted right now.
Mr. Treasurer, Matt, point of order, I think we probably need to take this off the consent agenda if we're going to be discussing it.
so we're gonna need a modified motion, I suppose.
Okay.
Help me with parliamentary procedure here, somebody.
There hadn't been a second yet, I believe. Consent, or what, I think there was a second.
Okay, it was.
So I think Secretary Marshall made,
Did you make the
you
motion?
withdraw your motion?
I'll take my motion back.
Okay. So let's,
Gladly. Regroup.
all right, let's start over with a modified consent agenda, which would include City of Burlington, Town of Cornelius, Town of Dunn, City of Durham, Mecklenburg County times 3, and City of Thomasville. Do I hear a motion for those as the modified consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Second. Ms. Burns. Call the roll, please.
I messed up, pardon me, it was Wooten and Hoffman that did the consent agenda motion. I'm
Yeah.
terribly sorry.
That was the one that was withdrawn. I think we were on.
No, we were on the other four, I
I don't
thought.
know what.
We did the consent agenda, didn't we, Cindy?
We didn't vote on
Yeah,
it.
we didn't vote on it. That's what
Okay.
happened. So we just
I
withdrew that.
apologize. All right. We're going with Marshall, sorry.
Burns.
Who was the second?
Burns.
I'm so sorry,
Yeah.
Mr. Burns.
Okay.
Take it about Mr. Peters. All right, back to the consent agenda as announced by Treasurer Griner with 4 items removed. Okay, Marshall Burns, Auditor Bowling.
Aye.
Thank you. Secretary Wooten.
Aye.
Mr. Butler.
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Harvey.
Aye.
Councilwoman Hoffman.
Aye.
Mr. Philbeck.
Aye.
Thank you all, and Treasurer Briner.
Aye.
Okay.
And so why don't we do these in alphabetical order? So we'll start with Ashe County and to kind of get the questions of the county itself. They are in attendance virtually. The county manager, Adam Stum, the county finance officer, Sandra Long, and the county tax administrator, Chris Lambert. Maybe to you, Mr.
Yeah. On most of the GO bonds that's been approved for projects, we show the percentage of vote. And is there any reason why we did not show the percentage of vote on Ashe County? And particularly since the per capita tax is going to be $371, and after this, it's going to go to $2,057, which is over a 500% increase. I just wanted to see how the vote went up there.
Mr. Butler, that was not a general obligation bond, that was.
It was not?
No, you're limited.
Well, they're getting ready to step it up there. Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions on the Ashe County limited obligation bonds? Please.
Yeah, I do have a question. Is that really a correct thing from 371 to over $2,000? Yeah, that's the debt
Debt per capita.
per capita. Was this a unanimous decision of the county commissioners?
We can look back to see if
Okay,
it's
well,
unanimous,
we're
but
not
we
going to
know,
second guess the political, but,
we know that they had a public hearing and passed a resolution.
okay.
I don't think I've ever seen one since I've been here that's that big a job.
Right. I would point out, we do have multiple other issuing entities who have much more per capita on our agenda than this meeting, even after the jump.
Yeah, but it's the increase.
Of course.
Mr. Treasurer, this is Mike Philbeck. At 9.8 million, they had a relatively low debt level anyway. It's what it looks like to me, but I don't know that much about Ashe County.
to the point of $2,000 after $2,000 per capita after the issuance still compares relative to many of the other issuers on our agenda for this meeting. Any other questions or discussion items for Ashe County? I'll entertain a motion then to approve the limited obligation bonds for Ashe County.
I so move.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Mr. Burns. We'll call the roll, please.
Okay. Ashe County, Butler, Burns. Secretary Marshall? Aye. Alder Bullock?
Aye.
Thank you. Secretary Wooten?
Aye.
Ms. Harvey?
Aye.
Councilwoman Hoffman?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck?
Aye.
And Treasurer Briner?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries for Ashe County.
Perhaps we do the City of Greensboro and the Piedmont Triad Regional Water Authority together, since there was a result of someone needing to recuse themselves, unless there are questions that are separate on different issues.
So Ms. Harvey only recused from Piedmont Triad.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ms. Hoffman has it.
Sorry, okay, we do need to do them separately, my apologies. So we'll go with the City of Greensboro general obligation bonds for refunding. I imagine that there's not a tremendous number of questions on issuing entity seeking to save some money.
I move approval, Mr. Treasurer.
Second.
And a second from the auditor.
Because it's a replacement. Yeah, okay.
Call the roll, please.
All right.
For City.
City of Greensboro's item, motion Wooten, second Bullock. Secretary Marshall? Aye. Thank you. Mr. Burns?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Butler?
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Harvey?
Aye.
Councilwoman Hoffman recuses. Mr. Philbeck?
Aye.
Thank you. And Treasurer Briner?
Aye.
Right, so that motion carries.
So we'll move on to Piedmont Triad Regional Water Authority. Are there any questions or discussion items?
Move approval.
So moved. Secretary Marshall, do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Butler with a second. Call the roll, please.
All right, Piedmont Triad Regional Water Authority, Marshall, Butler, Auditor Bullock.
Aye.
Thank you. Secretary Wooten,
Aye.
Mr. Burns,
Aye.
Harvey Hoffman recused, Mr. Philbeck.
Aye.
Thank you, and Treasurer Briner.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries 7.
So then our final agenda item, the Western Piedmont Council of Government. In attendance are the Director of Administrative Service and HR, David Pugh, and the Director of Finance, Andrea Roper, for any questions or discussion items.
Clarification. Talking about the debt service here, this occupancy tax is something that they would get each year depending upon the occupancy and all, and it's their choice to use it for this purpose as opposed to programming purposes or anything else, advertising they might use it for.
The language I've always seen in the occupancy tax is it outlines specifically how the money can be used. Like down on the beach on the coast, it says it can be used for beach renourishment. And there's usually a percentage broke down in there of what it will be done, street lights or whatever, law enforcement or whatever it is. I don't know that all the occupancy taxes that I've ever been a part of break down exactly how it'll be utilized.
So, Mr. Treasurer,
Yes.
I can tell you that I know what Mr. Butler's saying is generally true, but I happen to be very familiar that in the good county of Cleveland, they can use their occupancy tax for any general fund purpose they choose. But the city of Shelby got its later, and it is designated to economic development and tourism by percentages. So there are some exceptions to that, Mr. Butler, at least one I'm aware of.
So are the folks from the Western Piedmont Council of Governments on the line and can answer the questions specific to them?
Yes, sir. Mr. Treasurer and members of the commission, this is Anthony Starr. I'm the Executive Director for the Western Piedmont Council of Governments. Thank you for the opportunity to your consideration today. So to clarify, this is a misunderstanding of terminology in the application, it says occupancy funds, but that in no way is the same thing as occupancy taxes. So that is just a classification of our program funds and how we use our indirect funds to pay the debt service. We have a couple of other questions that came up briefly is we've had 100% membership since our creation, since 1968. Our board has one elected official from each local government, and they voted unanimously to approve this debt issuance. And the debt service will only be 0.8% of our total budget annually going forward. We're in good financial condition. Thank you.
Just to clarify so that we can correct this, so in materials that commission members have been provided with, it says funds generated by occupancy tax. So to clarify, you're saying that should read as occupancy funds. There is no...
No materials we submitted use the term occupancy tax. We did use the term occupancy funds. That is supported by our indirect funds. It's a cost accounting mechanism to spread the cost of debt service across different programs, but we did not use the term occupancy tax, and no occupancy taxes will be used. We do not receive any occupancy taxes from local governments.
We will make that correction, Mr. Treasurer, in the materials to be sure that that's not misrepresenting at all the source of the funds.
Okay, any other questions or concerns on Western Piedmont Council of Governments? I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second. Mr. Burns, second. Call the roll, please.
For the Western Piedmont COG, that's Marshall and Burns. Auditor Bolden. Thank you. Secretary Wooten.
Aye.
Mr. Butler. Thank you. Ms. Harvey.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hoffman.
Aye.
Mr. Philbeck.
Aye.
And Treasurer Bryant.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carried.
Thank you. That concludes the voting piece of the agenda. For a series of updates, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. I wanted to update commission members on the town of Speed. At the December meeting of the commission voted to require the town of Speed to hire assistants to essentially fulfill the duties of the finance officer as required under statute. There were a number of concerns that staff had and presented to the commission that were the reason for that resolution. The town did respond. The response wasn't necessarily, it was in the spirit of what was requested, if not complete. There was no specific timeline, and I apologize, I'm rifling through my papers to look for the resolution. The resolution required that the town respond, which they did, and that there was a timeline provided for rectifying the issues that were identified in the resolution. There was no timeline, so we'll be following up with the unit on that. The resolution also required that the town confirm that the town has hired adequate assistance. We do know that the town has been in contact with a third-party bookkeeper. They've identified one and identified the rate. Staff has followed up, LGC staff has followed up with the town with a series of questions we have regarding that contract. At the December meeting, Auditor Holmes at the time had asked the question of staff was if the commission were essentially compelling them to hire outside help, did the town have adequate funds to pay for such help? And we assured the commission that we had reviewed their budget to make sure they had funds, but we want to make sure that the general fund budget in Speed is about $72,000 in the ballpark of that. So we know there's not a huge amount of funds available for this kind of activity. We have learned from the town who they intend to engage and what the rate would be, and we're trying to work with them to ensure that they're putting safeguards in place to make sure they have the funds available before they engage in that work and wind up with an invoice that they can't essentially necessarily afford. So we're still actively working with Speed. We still have a number of concerns, and we'll continue to work with them. But they did submit a response. And we will continue to work with them. So if there's any questions on speed, I'm happy to take them.
You're comfortable that they're continuing to work with you? You're not meeting resistance and like phone calls returned and things like that? I mean, they're continuing to work with staff?
It's improved. Their level of response, I believe, has improved. And I believe they have a board meeting this evening. So we are hoping they heed the advice that we've given them in writing. I believe we've also shared with the league to loop them into this to make sure that they can assist as needed. So we are hoping that they heed the advice and not enter into a contract without reviewing our concerns and making sure that they should enter into the contract before they vote to do so. So.
Okay, thank you.
That's it for speed. Okay. My next item quickly is a summary for members of a quick, brief year in review of LGC actions last year. It was a busy year last year, as it always seems to be, but I just wanted to highlight a few things that the commission acted on or achieved in 2024. As always, there was some new legislation for us to respond to. Senate Bill 299, which allowed the commission the authority to direct the withholding of a portion of sales tax. That was a big lift and it was a big change. And so that was, I believe, successfully implemented last year. We had another law actually back in 2023 that changed the language that bond referenda had to include. We got a lot of questions from local governments, and again, LGC and staff are looked to for guidance. So in May of 24, we published guidance for local governments on how to conform with that requirement under law for what that bond referendum language had to include. A few other laws that we worked to implement. We also continue to take action, Mr. Butler, on viable utility reserve items. A number of things, again, under viable utility legislation, the State Water Infrastructure Authority and the Local Government Commission have a lot of shared responsibilities and authority, and the commission took action last year to continue to fulfill those responsibilities and execute that authority under law. We started 2024 with 4 units under LGC control. By, I think it was about the end of August, all 4 staff had managed to complete all the actions necessary to address the deficiencies that had led to the assumption of control and return those units all to local control. We obviously continue still to provide oversight and guidance to those units, but active financial management has been returned to local control. Before that happened, the commission was involved in adopting budgets and doing all of the other actions required of the governing board, the local governing boards, as you acted on their behalf during that time of control. A big one, and we don't have some of the staff here who worked on this, the LGC certified a mutual fund for local government investment. Again, under statutes, local governments can only invest idle funds in ways allowable under law, and one of those is a mutual fund certified by the LGC. Based on some significant changes we made to administrative code, there was a new method for certification, and we certified the first fund under those new rules in 2024. I wanted to highlight the work of our debt staff led by Jennifer. In 2024, we had the LGC considered over 253 applications from 161 local governments and public authorities, representing almost $11 billion in requests. And again, when you look at what this means, even from what we saw today, we're talking about communities' ability to build schools and roads and sidewalks and parks and things like that. So all these dollars led to improvements for their communities. We had anything from a $3,802 loan request for the town of Princeton to a $2.5 billion request for Mecklenburg County. So that's the range of items you're looking at and reviewing every month. We did, and looking ahead into 2025, we had what you can anticipate in your agenda packets in the coming months. And November, obviously, with the elections, we had a number of bond referenda. There were 22 separate bond referenda from 10 counties or municipalities, representing over $1.4 billion in funding. All those will be coming to you for approval. You saw a few of those on the agenda today, but you'll expect to see more of those general obligation bonds coming up. Lead service line inventory projects, there is a federal rule requiring, an EPA rule requiring inventory and replacement of lead lines and drinking water systems. Federal funds are available and coming through the states. So you'll continue to see, as you did last year, a large number, a number of requests for loans for those projects because, again, those are required under EPA rules. And finally, I think one of the things we'll be looking at in 2025 is continuing to look at the challenges that local governments are facing with audit submission. We know the challenges are out there. We want to work with stakeholders to see what we can do to provide, I don't want to call it flexibility, but to recognize those challenges while at the same time also recognizing the importance and the transparency that timely annual audits bring. To that point, LGC staff has announced that for fiscal year 2025 audits, the due date of October 31st that had been in place for units with fiscal year ends, which includes all counties and municipalities, that audit due date will be extended from October 31st to December 31st as a permanent measure, not as a one-time kind of measure. We're hoping that that allows some more capacity with these local auditors. One of the challenges is we're losing local auditors, that this increases some of the capacity of these auditors to address the audits and get them in by December 31st. We've talked extensively with staff to make sure there were no unintended consequences of that. And again, this is a deadline for submission to the LGC as required under our statute, under Chapter 159-34A. If other agencies, entities require an annual audit for other purposes, clearly they can set their own dates. But for the purposes of submission to the LGC, we want to extend that date, and we're extending that date to December 31st. Again, in recognition of some of the challenges and as a first step in trying to find some ways that we can address some of the challenges we know local governments are facing. So
it might be useful to provide some of the editorial commentary you provided me around what actually has been happening anyway with the October 31st deadline.
I think we've also sort of stumbled our way into a lot of confusion because right now what we have is an October 31st due date for the audit reports. What we had set up was, as background, so not only do local governments have to submit their audits to us, they have to submit their contracts for the audits to us and the invoices for the contract work. So all those items are coming to staff for approval. Audit reports were due October 31st. If a unit didn't submit their audit by October 31st, but they got it in by December 1st, we said, well, don't worry about sending us a new contract. It's okay. So we had this extension for contracts, but not audits. So now people just assume that was the audit due date. So now we have an October 31st date, and now we have a December 1st date. For FPICs, we said the audit was late for purposes of FPICs if it was in by January 1st. So now we have October 31st, we have December 1st, and we have January 1st. So if somebody says, my audit's late, or when's an audit late, nobody really knew what late meant. It depended on what the definition of late was, I think. So I think that introduced a lot of confusion too. And I know we've seen a lot of things that said, well, the extended due date was December 1st. And we used to always say that wasn't an extended due date. It was. So we'll work really to communicate this. We've already put this out through our blog. We present at conferences statewide throughout the year. We'll continue to put that message out there. But with the extension to the December 31st date, that'll also be a firm date. If the audit isn't in by December 31st, you need an amended contract January 1st. That's it. So there's not going to be a series of dates, and nobody's quite sure when that late date comes in. So it is now December 31st. And again, just a small asterisk because nothing's ever always or never. That's for units with June 30th fiscal year ends that use our audit contract. There are other entities, like housing authorities, that have longer due dates, 10-month due dates, things like that. But generally, those units that would have submitted on October 31st, because they have a June 30th fiscal year end, will have that December 31st date. So but thank you.
Sure, we think this provides more transparency and clarity to all the units under our supervision, and so I think it's a welcome change. And I thank Debbie for leading all the effort in getting it done. So with that, any comments, questions before we entertain a motion to adjourn?
So I apologize, Mr. Treasurer. One final thing, just on the meeting dates coming up. So our next meeting is February 4th. The March meeting is March 4th. We are still awaiting, we do like to align for the convenience of members who serve on both the LGC and Council of State. We align those dates with Council of State calendar. They've not yet announced their 2025 calendar. As soon as they do, we'll finalize ours. Again, for general planning purposes, it tends to be the first Tuesday of the month unless there's a holiday. So that's the only reason we haven't announced those dates yet. But as soon as we get confirmation from Council of State, we'll be finalizing the meeting dates for April through December.
Any final comments or questions? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Very successful first meeting.
Thank you.
And no fire, actually.
Right. Still have them show up. So a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Honorable Bullock, second.
Second.
Secretary Martin. We'll call the roll.
For adjourning, Bullock, Marsh, Secretary Wooten.
Aye.
And Mr. Burns.
Aye.
Mr. Butler.
Aye.
Ms. Harvey.
Aye.
And Councilwoman Hoffman.
Aye.
Thank you. And Happy New Year, all. Mr. Philbeck.
Aye.
And Treasurer Biden.
Aye. We are adjourned. Congratulations.